Hey guys, welcome back to ChessGoals. I'm here with another preview from our 1e4 course. This is on Chapter 7, the French defense. So after e4, e6, we're recommending d4 and e5, the advanced variation. The reason I'm recommending the advanced variation is because we're recommending the advance against the Caro-Kann, but more importantly, we're recommending the c3 Sicilian against 1 c5, and there's going to be some transpositions from the c3 Sicilian when black plays e6 and c5 to the French defense chapter with e6, d5, and c5. So these chapters flow together nicely with the 1e4 course, and that's something that I'm always keeping in mind, the different transpositions. So after c5, we're recommending c3, the standard move, and after knight to c6, knight to f3, defending the center. The most popular move for black is queen to b6, trying to put some pressure on this pawn on d4, right? We see pawn, knight, queen, all attacking it. It's 3 attackers, 3 defenders. So we do have to be a little bit careful, because if we see this other knight come into the game, that could be a 4th attacker for black. So at this point, after queen to b6, we're recommending pawn to a3. This is kind of a cool move. We're planning on playing b4 next, which could allow bishop to b2 defending the d pawn, but it also keeps our b pawn safe, because on b2 it can be attacked by the black queen. On b4 it's defended by the pawn on a3. Now here, interestingly enough, the most popular move is actually a mistake for black. C takes d4. The reason this is a mistake is it allows us to develop a bit easier, because the knight can come out to c3 if needed. So resolving this tension doesn't really favor black. And one thing that I really like to talk about whenever it comes to this pawn tension, if you look at this pawn on c5, it has 3 options currently. It can sit still and do nothing. It can push past, pawn to c4, or it can take on d4. So that's 3 options. Look at the pawn on d4. It can sit still, or it can capture. 2 options. There's an extra option for this pawn on c5. That's an advantage for black with the pawn on c5. Turn some light on. So black doesn't want to immediately take this pawn on d4, because that pawn on c5 actually was advantageous to the pawn on d4. Alright, so after c takes d4, we're going to take back with the c pawn. Most common move is knight to e7, and this knight is headed to f5, pressuring the pawn on d4. But here we can play knight to c3, and this is the key idea. The knight on c3 can actually head over to a4, and from a4 it attacks the queen. So after knight to f5, we're going to continue with this plan. Knight a4, hitting the queen. Black is not able to win this pawn on d4. If queen to a5 check is played, we can meet that with pawn to b4. That doesn't help black, it actually helps us. So queen to c7 is the main move. And now look at this cool move. We have pawn to g4. And now black has a choice. They can either take on d4, sacrificing a knight for 2 pawns. So knight takes, and take the e-pawn. Or they can retreat this knight, which is the most popular move by quite a bit at the club level. It's very rare to sacrifice on d4 here. But the problem for black is now they're kind of admitting that bringing the knight out to f5 and the queen out to b6 were bad ideas, right? Because all of those black pieces are now being pushed back to black's side of the board. Everything is very passive for black, and we have full control in the center. We have these pawns on d4 and e5, and now both flanks we're starting to grab control as well. So we're really controlling the whole board here. This is a great position for white so far. And I love looking at the stats. After our recommended bishop to e3 at the club level, white is winning 68% and black is winning 28%. So 68 to 28, those are pretty good odds at the club level that white's going to win this game. So let's look at a couple more moves. Bishop e3, knight to g6 is the main move for black, trying to get this bishop out next. But here we can play pawn to h4. The stockfish advantage is 2.3, and it's due to space, activity, and the initiative. So all 3 of those things give us a 2.3 stockfish eval, and our plan is to play bishop to d3 next, followed by rook to c1 and pawn to h5. This is the very main line of the French at the club level. We just followed the most popular moves for black all the way through, and we're looking at a 2.3 advantage And I left you with this nice plan to increase the advantage. I think it's very difficult to play this position from the black side. If you want to look at it, here it is. Black is not having any fun here. Look at these pawns coming, H and G. Pawn to B4 could be coming on the queen side. There's not an easy break in the center. You might want F6, but right now it could be captured, weakening the black king, and there's not a good place for the black king to hide. So this position is not looking fun at all for black. That's the main line of the French defense. Okay, so let's go back to move 6 after A3, and let's give black a stronger move. We'll go with bishop to D7. And that keeps this tension between C and D. Now my recommendation is pawn to B4, and we can see this pawn on C5 is attacked by 2 of our pawns, and this is helping to secure our queen side, right? So the B2 pawn is no longer a potential weakness. It came up to B4, and it's actually a strong attacker on B4. Now at this point, there's 2 common moves, C takes B4 and C takes D4. Take a second to think about this. One of those moves is a mistake. Which one do you think it is? And feel free to pause the video. C takes B or C takes D, which is the mistake? The answer is C takes B4 is the mistake. If C takes B4 is played, we take back with the A pawn. The rook gets opened up on the A file, and this brings another pawn towards the center. So C takes D4 is the correct move in this position, and we take back with the C pawn. Now knight to E7 is the main line, and again, just like the line we looked at, our recommendation is knight to C3, and after knight to F5, triple attacking that D pawn, we're just in time again for knight to A4, attacking the black queen, and black is not able to win this pawn on D4. After queen to C7, here I'm shifting the repertoire a little bit from that G4 idea to simply bishop to B2. So now that we have this easy bishop to B2, that's the recommendation. Let's just defend this D pawn a third time, and again we're playing for the full control. Right center we already have control, queenside we have this big space advantage, kingside we could grab that space advantage if we want to later. And looking at the stats, again 68% white is winning, club database 28% for black. So pretty much identical stats in this position as that other one we looked at. And what we're looking to play here, rook to C1, bishop to D3, maybe even knight to C5. If black plays B5 down the line, that knight can just very nicely head to the outpost of C5. This position is looking very good. Alright, so let's look at the main move for black. Bishop to E7. We're recommending rook to C1. And we're threatening pawn to B5 right now because this knight on C6 is pinned by the rook. Pawn to B5 would win the knight. And after A6, we have bishop to D3. H4 is also a good move here. But I'm recommending this. Let's get the bishop out. Let's get the king castled. And then we'll look to expand with our pawns. So castle for black, castle for white. Most common move is B5, which allows knight to C5. And after bishop takes, rook takes, Stockfish eval here is 2.5, and that's due to full control of the board and also king safety, right? So we see that this black king doesn't have a lot of protection outside of this knight, and we do have bishop pointing over here, knight and queen ready to join the attack, and this bishop could even drop back to point at h6. So we can very quickly shift gears over to the king side, whereas black's pieces are a little bit cramped up there, and it's hard to shift back and forth king side to queen side. So we have the 2.5 Stockfish advantage, and what we would like to do in this position is play pawn to g4, pawn to h4, knight to g5, bishop back to b1, queen to d3, and we're going for a full king side attack here. We have a lot of play in this position, and it's not fun at all to play for black. Alright, so let's look at one more option after 6a3. What if black plays c4? This is the most popular move at the master level, so it is still very important for us to cover. I'm recommending knight b to d2. What we're going to try to do is lock down the king side, but also prepare the b pawn break on the queen side. So knight to a5 is a strong move for black. This is trying to prevent b3 or b4. But now I'm recommending rook to b1, and I really like this move. It's renewing the threat of both b3 and b4. Bishop to d7 by black, and now I'm recommending bishop to e2, And we're planning on playing h4, maybe h5, and we might even tuck the king up here onto g2. So that's something that we can do in these French structures when the center's all locked up. Our king can tuck nice and cozily onto g2, and we can push the h-pawn up the board, which kind of prevents the black pawns from creating counterplay, and our rook can even come out through the h-file. So knight e7 is the main move, and I'm recommending pawn to h4. We have a nice positional advantage on the king side. Now, black tends to queenside castle in these positions because it's very difficult for them to go kingside, and also they see the potential kingside attack coming. So queenside castling is more popular. And now I'm recommending knight to f1. And let's just show a few more moves, kind of show how play can continue here. King to b8, pawn to h5, trying to lock down things over here on the king side. And if black ignores this h-pawn, I'm actually recommending you push it all the way up to h6. And this is going to kind of show the power of the h-pawn. Our king can stay in the center, and we're actually playing for an advantage over on the king side, even though typically you would want to play against the queen side because that's where the black king is hiding. In this case, the queen side is pretty locked down, and all of these black pieces are sort of trapped over here on the queen side for now, and our pieces can play king side. So there's a lot of fluid play on the king side. Queen side's locked down. Let's go for our advantage king side here. After g takes h, we can play bishop to f4, and here we have an advantage of 1.5 according to Stockfish, and it's due to space and board control. And our plan here is to play queen to d2, knight to g3, the knight could come out to h5, our king can tuck onto f1, and this bishop could come back to d1, pointing back at this diagonal so that we could play b3 or b4 later. So that's one thing to keep in mind. When you have full control of a position and you have control of both flanks, you can play on one flank, see if your opponent reacts to that flank or not, but then also keep in mind that you have play on the other flank at the same time. So that's what we're doing here. We're going to play kingside, but we know we could also easily shift to queenside, and because black is a little bit cramped on space, they can't get the pieces back and forth kingside to queenside as easily as we can. Alright, so I hope you guys liked this preview. This is Chapter 7, the French Defense, from the upcoming 1E4 course, and this course will be released next week, and there will be a sale on the course until we have all the videos recorded, but immediately when you purchase the course, you will get the full PGN file with instructions on how to upload that so you can put it into Chessable, ChessBase, LeadChess, Chess.com. You get the full PGN, and then as Jesse and I record the videos, you will get access to all the videos for these 10 chapters as soon as we have them recorded. Alright, so hope you guys like this video. I hope you are interested in the E4 course. I'm really excited about it. Jesse has been testing it already. He really likes his attacking positions he's getting. And we will have an update soon when the course is released. Thanks for watching.